I never thought I'd be the kind of man telling this kind of story. But here I am. You know how some memories feel so vivid that you can smell the room, hear the laughter, even years later? That's how I remember the night I met Claire. Let's call her Claire. She was 31 at the time. I was 36. We met through mutual friends at a birthday dinner. One of those noisy gatherings where people clink glasses too hard and tell inside jokes you're not a part of yet. Claire was sitting across the table laughing at a story I didn't even hear. But it was her smile that pulled me in. It wasn't just pretty. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like she was in on something bigger, something you wanted to know. We started talking over dessert, and by the end of the night I walked her to her car. She joked about how she barely remembered where she'd parked, and when she finally found it, she looked at me like she wanted me to stay. I didn't, not that night. But I left with her number, and from there it unfolded quickly. Our first few months were intense. We clicked in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Long hikes on weekends, takeout dinners that turned into conversations until 2 a.m., her teasing me about my clumsy attempts at cooking. But it wasn't all perfect. We had one early breakup after about 8 months. I'll be honest, I was cautious, maybe even guarded, and she said she felt like I wasn't fully there. We parted ways, but a few weeks later she showed up at my apartment in tears. She admitted she'd been impulsive, that she missed me, that she wanted to rebuild what we had, and I believed her. We patched things up, and for the first time, I let myself believe she might be my future. By 2024, I was planning for that future in secret. I started putting money aside for a ring, thinking about neighborhoods where we could maybe buy a small house. She didn't know, but I was ready. Ready to ask her to be my wife, ready to take that next step. And then, out of nowhere, things shifted. Claire sat me down one evening, her voice unusually careful, and told me she thought we needed a little space. She said I hadn't been as present as she needed me to be. At first, I thought it was about my job. I had been logging long hours trying to land a promotion, but then she started dropping a new name into conversations. Jason, a colleague of hers. She'd talk about how funny he was, how he always had these clever comebacks during meetings, how he'd just get her sense of humor. She said it casually, but I noticed. And then, almost as suddenly, she stopped mentioning him at all, completely, as if he had never existed. That silence told me more than her words ever could. It was the beginning of the unraveling, though I didn't know it yet. The weeks after Claire asked for space felt like walking through fog. One moment she was warm, affectionate, wanting to spend a quiet evening at home. The next she was distant, scrolling her phone while I tried to talk, sighing when I asked what was wrong. I didn't want to believe the worst, but in my gut I knew something was shifting. It didn't help that a mutual friend, someone I trusted, pulled me aside one afternoon. He told me he'd overheard Claire's coworkers joking that Jason was basically her work husband, that some even encouraged her to spend more time with him. And when I asked point blank if she'd crossed any lines, Claire looked me dead in the eye and said, "I haven't cheated, but I can't deny I feel pulled away." That sentence hit harder than any confession. It was the kind of half-truth that leaves you questioning everything. Pulled away. As if I were a shore she was drifting from, and Jason was the tide carrying her out. I tried to hold on. I tried to fix it. But love can't survive on one person's effort alone. After one last late-night argument, her insisting she didn't know what she wanted, I ended things. Not in anger, but with the quiet clarity of someone who finally understands they've been dismissed. I quit my job not long after, packed up what I could fit into my car, rented a small apartment in another city, and told myself this was the clean break I needed. A new start, away from the ghost of our relationship. For months, I didn't hear from her. I deleted her number, muted her on social media, did everything I could to let the silence become routine. I started jogging in the mornings, cooking simple meals, forcing myself to meet new people at work. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Then, at Christmas, I drove back to my hometown for a holiday gathering. Family, old friends, the smell of mulled wine. It should have been comforting. But when I walked into that crowded living room, there she was, Claire. Same smile, same eyes that once felt like home. She lit up when she saw me, started walking my way. And for a second, I froze, my chest tightened, and every memory came rushing back. But instead of staying, instead of reopening that wound, I nodded politely and walked right past her. I didn't owe her a scene. I didn't owe her anything. Still, as I drove away that night, the ache returned. Healing isn't linear, and sometimes the hardest part is resisting the temptation to step back into old patterns. Listener, if you've ever had to let someone go for your own peace, tap subscribe. You'll want to hear where this goes. When I got back to my new city after the holidays, I thought I'd left Claire behind for good. But a few weeks later, I started noticing something strange. It began innocently, seeing her across the street when I was grabbing coffee before work. At first I thought it was just a coincidence. Cities are big, but not impossibly so. Then, 2 days later, she was at the park I jogged in, sitting on a bench with a book. Another week passed, and she happened to bump into me at my gym. By the third time, my stomach dropped. These weren't coincidences. Eventually, the truth came out through mutual contacts. Claire had relocated. Officially, the story was that she moved to work at her uncle's firm, which happened to be headquartered here. But the timing, the frequency of our run-ins, the way she seemed to hover at the edges of my life, it felt less like fate and more like intention. Friends of mine, who still knew her, started pressuring me. "Come on, man. At least talk to her," one said. "She regrets what happened. She deserves closure." Another chimed in. "She's been through a lot since you left. Maybe hear her out." But I resisted. Every time I thought back to that sentence, I feel pulled away. The moment someone admits they're halfway out the door, you can't make them come back. And if they do, it's never the same. The strangest moment came when my phone rang late one evening. It wasn't Claire, it was her parents. Her father's voice was steady, but heavy as he apologized for her behavior. He admitted she had broken down after I left, that she'd confessed how deeply she regretted letting Jason into her world. He told me she was in therapy now, that she was working on herself, and that even if I couldn't forgive her, maybe I could at least sit down with her one last time. I sat there with the phone in my hand long after the call ended. It was surreal, her own parents reaching out, trying to patch together what she had shattered. A part of me wanted to believe this was proof she'd finally changed. But another part, the part that remembered the nights I sat awake alone while she texted someone else, knew better. This wasn't about closure. It was about her trying to rewrite a chapter I'd already finished. After that phone call with Claire's parents, I spent a long night pacing my apartment. The apology they offered was genuine. I could hear the shame in her mother's voice, the protective frustration in her father's. They weren't bad people, they just wanted their daughter to find peace. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that closure isn't something you give to someone else. It's something you claim for yourself. I wrote them a message the next morning. I thanked them for reaching out, told them I respected their effort, and explained as kindly as I could. I wouldn't be seeing Claire. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because the wound was still tender, and I couldn't afford to let it open again. They didn't reply, but they didn't need to. Their words had helped me in a way I didn't expect, just not in the way they intended. After that, I blocked Claire everywhere. Phone, email, social media. Not because I wanted to erase her, but because healing requires boundaries. I stepped back from a few mutual friends who couldn't understand why I wouldn't give her one more chance. And slowly, I built a life that felt like mine again. I started hiking on weekends, alone at first, then with a small group I met through a community club. I took a cooking class just to force myself out of my comfort zone, and laughed at how badly I chopped onions compared to the others. I invested in myself in ways I had neglected while trying to hold a relationship together that was already falling apart. What gave me real peace was remembering that I didn't need Claire's apology to move forward. Her parents' words were enough. They acknowledged the harm, and that acknowledgement allowed me to finally breathe without bitterness. If there's one thing I took from all of this, it's that you don't owe your past a second chance. Love isn't about proving how compassionate you are, or how forgiving you can be. It's about protecting the parts of yourself that can't be rebuilt once they're destroyed. Sometimes, the coldest decision, closing the door and never reopening it, is actually the warmest kindness you can offer yourself. And if my story helped you hold your own line, listener, subscribe. I've got more truths to share.